Hi, this is Tim from the Positively Charged podcast, and this is part 2 where we're looking at emotions. Let's look at some of the ways we can increase positive emotions and release those negative and unresolved emotions that are holding us back, causing us any distress and limiting us from living the most happy and vibrant life that we possibly can. So, acceptance. It's critical for us to accept how we feel in order to acknowledge where we are emotionally, so we can accurately work on step by step rising up through the levels of different emotions until we pass into the more empowering emotions and we begin to feel better. Many of us are conditioned to think and feel that it's wrong to feel negative emotions, and this external judgment can greatly impact upon us, making us feel bad about feeling bad. We can associate guilt, shame and other painful and disempowering emotions to how we're feeling, and this of course just fuels the fire and leads us to slide further down the scale of emotions. Anything that doesn't deal with a cause is simply masking an effect. Give yourself permission to feel the reality of your emotional state. When we're little children, we have absolutely no problem in letting out our emotions, do we? If you're out in a public place and you see a child throwing a tantrum, it's because they're releasing that emotional energy that they feel. And hopefully in later life we develop more sophisticated and evolved ways of releasing that energy. But even at that age and at that point in their lives, a child knows instinctively to release that energy as opposed to hold on to it, let it build up, and ultimately for it to be reflected inwards. If you're feeling anger, find a constructive way to let that anger out that doesn't negatively impact upon anyone else. Make a proactive decision that you're not going to take it out on someone else. Like lightning grounds itself as it strikes, sometimes we can lash out at the nearest people to us, often the people that we're closest to. So just find what works for you. Maybe go to a gym or run or hit a punching bag, run round the block, or do as many ancient cultures did and go walkabout, release it. To quote the song, express yourself. Once you give yourself permission to feel that emotion, well, for a start, you release the associated feeling of guilt that was holding you back, which, of course, is one of those lower emotions that may have been a component in either how you were feeling anyway and a factor in why maybe you hadn't been able to move on from that emotion. With regard to gratitude and appreciation, I always remember the saying, being thankful keeps your tank full. When you wake up, how do you start off your day? When you first open your eyes, do you say thank you for getting to live that day? Appreciation is showing gratitude. As you wake up tomorrow, be aware of what are the first few things that come to mind that you could be grateful for. If you find this difficult to do from the emotional place of where you're at, well, just focus on the basics. Being grateful that you woke up to live another day. Being grateful for the people in your life who love you and care about you. Being thankful that you're one of the fortunate people that has a roof over their head and can afford to eat today. Acknowledging the basics leads us to having a clearer perspective too, as focus on what we do have already and having the awareness that it's not the case for everybody makes it so much easier for us to feel gratitude and appreciation. Let's look at some things that we can actively do to change the way that we feel. The most immediate and literally hands-on way to change how you feel that I'm aware of is called emotional freedom technique, or as it's commonly abbreviated to EFT. This is a very interesting combination of Eastern and Western techniques fused together. It involves assessing the level of the emotion that you feel out of 10 so that you can gauge how much the intensity is lessening as you use the process, and then verbalizing how you feel. You then begin to tap with your fingers certain acupressure points on the face and on the hand. And at the same time, you acknowledge the emotional issue that you have, followed by a positive affirmation. You keep repeating this process, and as you repeat it each time, you compare the level of emotion that you're feeling out of 10. And with this technique, you should very quickly see the level of that emotion lessening. One of the most well-known people who use and teach EFT is called Nick Orkner, and he wrote the best-selling book called The Tapping Solution. He also made a very popular film of the same name, and each year runs a free EFT World Summit that this year has been listened to by well over 1 million people. His website is thetappingsolution.com, and if you go to this website, you can get a free audio download called Tapping for Stress Relief, which is instantly accessible and helps you to turn down your stress levels right away. You also get a free step-by-step tapping instructional video showing you the points that you'll be tapping and a basic explanation of how the affirmations work and what to say. Another very powerful tool for any kind of change is neurolinguistic programming, commonly abbreviated to NLP. This is a simple set of tools that allows you to clear emotional baggage and resolve your issues so that you can move forward to a brighter, more positive future. This change process is focused on you and the resolution of your problem. It helps people to move on where they've previously failed to do so by shifting damaging behaviours, health issues, or unwanted feelings. NLP regards that all behaviours are always motivated by a positive intent. And one of the goals of NLP is to show you what the positive intention is behind your behaviour and problem, and then guide you through the process of how to change that behaviour to something more positive and productive. The beauty of NLP is that it provides you with a range of tools to help you in any area of life that you choose. This isn't a short-term fix. It's just powerful, long-lasting, effective tools and techniques that can be applied to emotional issues. It's what I refer to as non-intrusive therapy. So, for example, if you were to go into psychoanalysis and undergo Freudian therapy, this would involve the conscious recollection and emotional re-experiencing of a lot of emotional trauma, which in itself, I found, through undergoing it myself, can actually intensify the negative emotions that you are feeling, and you could come away potentially feeling worse. NLP re-encodes the pathway that the brain uses to access memories and the associated and unresolved emotions, and it targets the level of the emotion. And just like a dimmer switch in your house that can turn down the level of light that's shining in your room, NLP turns down the intensity or the brightness of the emotion that is associated with the image. So you still remember the image of an event, just like a scratched piece of vinyl can no longer play. NLP uses a similar process so that it is impossible for us to press play on the level of emotion that is associated with the memory. Another advantage of NLP is that this therapy is quick as well as being effective, unlike other therapies that are a lot more drawn out and can involve sessions over weeks, months, and potentially years. You could search for either a qualified NLP practitioner in your local area or have a look at some online audio products and books. I recommend looking at the co-founder of NLP called Richard Bandler. His website is just richardbandler.com, where you'll find some incredible, very powerful, life-changing audio products on a variety of subjects that can help you. A technique that you can try at home right now is something called mirror work. And mirror work is another example of an idea that sounds so simple that how beneficial and powerful it actually is can be overlooked. So if you look in a mirror and go really close up to it, so you're looking right into your eyes, and slowly say, "I love you," 20 times. Now be aware of the changes in your voice tone and the feeling behind the words. Focus on aspects of yourself that you wish to improve upon. Allow yourself to openly feel the emotions, and as you do, add the phrase, "I accept you," in between saying, "I love you." And really feel that acceptance, that change is inevitably coming. It's a positive thing to acknowledge that you can still love the parts of yourself that you want to change while still striving to change them. The thing I've often noticed is halfway through this, the whole energy of me changes. Also, the energy behind what I'm saying changes, and by the end, the entire way in which you say the words has had a real impact upon you. It's a journey, and I do recommend to everybody to have a go at using this. Another powerful technique that we can use that is very simple is just the power of silence. Since the beginning of time, silence has been a natural occurring part of our everyday life. But in modern life, noise pollution is everywhere. Whether you be in a car or at work or just out in public, we're surrounded and bombarded with noise. And when people get home from work, many times they'll turn on the television out of habit, just as background noise. And the whole concept of background noise is quite interesting, because without knowing it, it's a way to avoid spending time with themselves and their own thoughts. And we're not naturally made to be without silence. We all have an inner voice, or what's also known as internal dialogue. And it's when we have silence in our life that we can really feel how still or busy our mind is. We can only have real emotional peace and release from negativity when we learn to quieten the mind. I sometimes refer to it as the inner critic. You know, that voice or feeling or both. Some people are more visual and some people have it more as a sensation. And sometimes that inner critic will say things like, you can't do this, or who do you think you are, or words to that effect. So how do we lessen this inner dialogue? Well, in order to know who you are and where you're at, you have to spend some time with yourself. We can start to quieten the mind by first sitting in silence, putting some time aside each day, and start to acknowledge that thoughts and that inner dialogue will come into your mind. And when they do, just simply release them. If you want, you can say, I release you, to yourself. And bring your focus back to the silence in between the dialogue. A universal principle is that what we focus on expands, what we give energy to grows. And so over time, as we practice focusing on the silence in between the dialogue, the amount of silence increases and the amount of inner dialogue or intrusive thoughts decreases. We can learn a lot about how comfortable we are in our own skin when the conscious mind is not engaged in other things. Regarding happiness and spending time alone in reflection, Franz Kafka once said, you need not do anything. Remain sitting at your table and listen. You don't even have to listen. Let go. Become quiet, still and solitary, and the world will freely offer itself to you to be unmasked. It has no choice. So let's imagine a situation where that inner dialogue, self-talk, that voice of limitation and doubt could start to appear. It might be when you're attempting something new for the first time, and that voice tells you things like, you're not the kind of person who does this kind of thing. Or maybe it occurs when you're repeatedly attempting a class 2 type experience, something that you know is good for you, but every time you start to make a move in that direction, that feeling or voice starts, and unfortunately, we often fall victim to its negative message. To help change the intensity and impact of that inner dialogue, imagine what that voice sounds like. So, is the inner voice the sound of your voice, or is it the sound of someone else's voice? And if so, who? And if it's more of a feeling that you get, whose voice could it be? If you had to rationalise it as a sound, who would it sound like? What would be the character of the voice? Would it be male or female, or high-pitched or low-pitched, or what would be the emotion behind it? What would be the intent? Be playful with this and get as specific as you can. And once you've done it, I want you to think of the most silly, non-serious voice that you can possibly imagine. It could be the sound of a favourite comedy character, for example. And every time that inner dialogue starts, replace the existing voice with the comedy voice. My point is that it's more difficult for you to take the impact of that voice quite as seriously if it's someone like Goofy from Walt Disney talking to you. It's that emotional dimmer switch again, just turning down the intensity of something. So be playful and don't make that classic mistake of letting the very thing that we're dealing with eliminating influence you to reject a piece of new knowledge. In other words, don't let that inner critic stop you from turning down the intensity of the inner critic. The whole point of changing the nature of the inner dialogue is so that you don't take it as seriously. You can imagine putting a sound effect on that voice, perhaps. So with me, with my inner dialogue, sometimes I've imagined it having the vocal effect called auto-tune on it that changed Cher's voice in the song Believe. Anyway, this technique plays into how the brain processes things, and so our opinion of its effectiveness is irrelevant to the actual results we experience. Okay, next, our language that we use is of huge impact on how we feel. I mentioned earlier that when we're feeling the higher level emotions, we feel more vibrant. And this is an interesting word because on an energy level, positive emotions have been measured and shown to have a quicker vibrational rate than the lower energy emotions. The words that we use both tell us a lot about ourselves, how we think about life, and also have a great effect on our emotional state. The subconscious mind recognizes only the presence of something, the existence of something, not the lack of something or the absence of something. So state things in the positive and focus on what you are going to do as opposed to what you're not going to do. So focus on what you have as opposed to what you perceive you lack. So here's an example of a negative that can't be processed. Do not think about this question. Why do we never see baby pigeons? So what image came to mind? I'm talking about baby pigeons not being seen, a lack of them. It's impossible to think of nothing. So when I was a kid, I remember a neighbour mentioned this principle to me, and I proudly informed him that I could think of nothing. And he asked me what I was thinking about looked like, to which I responded that I was thinking of one of the whiteboards that the teacher had used to write on at school. But, I told him, there's nothing at all on it. I was so pleased with my answer at the time, and the amount of pleasure that I felt was only matched by how peed off I was when I realised that in fact I had been thinking of something, which was a piece of school equipment. Another factor is, instead of using words like I should, or I would, or I could, replace them with I will. Then you talk in the affirmative, you affirm. Make your everyday language naturally full of affirmations so that they're more than something that you just open a book and read and recite as an exercise. Use them as part of who you are. Embed them into everything that you say as part of your life so you naturally live it. As opposed to self-development being something you do, we'll make it something you are. We can transform how we feel in life by transforming how we describe our feelings in life. So the descriptive words and phrases that we use both show where we're at emotionally and also in turn affect where we're at emotionally. It's a cycle, and the power of words has great consequences. So for example, when someone is really tired, they may say, I'm shattered, or I'm drained. And these kind of words have got great power to them. Can you feel the intensity of words like shattered and drained? So to recover from being shattered takes serious reassembly. And our subconscious deals in pictures and emotions. So be very aware of the nature of the pictures that your descriptions create. Think of when somebody fails at something and they may use a phrase like, I crashed and burned. That intensity of emotion that's now been reinforced regarding that event can really influence how you feel about that event, of course, upon recalling it. And if you remembered an event that had that level of negative emotion associated with it, that in itself may be enough to put you off from wanting to give it another go. It's good to realistically acknowledge how you're feeling and then look at the state you want to be feeling and focus on that instead. So if someone asks you, how you feel, rather than saying those negatively focused, intense adjectives and phrases, it's better to say something like, I'll be great after a rest. So you eliminate the negative charge and reinforce with a positive affirmation, because be great is part of that sentence. If you really want to step things up to the next level, instead of using the future tense, you can say, I am great and I'll feel even better after a rest. There's real power in the words that we use, and how words are put together is called how to spell, after all. As well as the words that we use, how we physically express ourselves, our physiology, is very important too. When we're feeling positive emotions, our body language is different to when we're feeling negative emotions. And this works both ways, as our body language in turn affects our emotions. It's a cycle of events. So what do we associate our body language and energy as being like when we're feeling emotionally strong and positive? It would be straight, upright posture, shoulders back, eyes looking straight or upwards, a strong voice, presence, engaging and vibrant, moving with poise and confidence. The phrase is, keep your chin up and things will look up, are rooted within the physiology of the emotion. So what do we associate our body language and energy as being like when we feel the opposite? When we're feeling that negative emotional state? We have a slouched posture, shoulders slumped forward, eyes looking down, a weaker voice, lower energy, and less physical presence. So phrases like, I'm feeling down and I'm in a low mood are rooted in physiology as well as describing the low vibrational states. So the physiology that goes along with these negative feelings is a necessary component to how we access and feel those lower emotional states. It's only possible to sustain those negative thoughts and feelings when we are showing the corresponding body language that goes along with them. And this is hugely important to understand and use. And so one of the strategies that we can use to change our emotional state from negative to positive is that if we can adopt the body language of that positive state, that will send a message through our central nervous system, which is controlled by our subconscious mind. Another thing that you can do with your body is alter your facial expressions. There are universal facial expressions, for example, of emotion that are hardwired into us as humans. Hence the standard use of emoticons in online written communication and social media. It is possible through adopting a contrasting physiology to positively influence our emotions, as is the basis of sayings like act as if and fake it till you make it. Another factor that greatly influences how we feel is our diet. So as with emotions, avoid contaminating your body with any toxins. The health of every cell directly contributes to your state of well-being. The pH of the body, the acidity and alkalinity levels of the food that you eat, is also a big part of your life and how you feel. Our ideal pH is slightly alkaline, 7.3 to 7.45, and you can test your pH levels regularly by using a piece of litmus paper on your saliva first thing in the morning before eating and drinking anything to ensure an accurate reading. Now, you can use something else other than saliva. I'm not going to risk that first thing in the morning. As a rule, nutrient-rich, naturally growing live foods are more alkaline. Many of the acidic things in our modern diet are the synthetic and artificially created food type products, fast food, convenience food, energy drinks. Also, unfortunately, as an English guy, tea and coffee and alcohol. Oh well. Acidity makes the physical, mental and emotional body weak, which is going to greatly impact our feelings long term. And our long-term feelings are generally referred to as our mood. The body produces its own uplifting chemicals known as endorphins by breaking down the food, and it's therefore possible to raise the levels of those substances in the brain by eating foods containing a combination of nutrients which naturally release endorphins. Low endorphin levels can be caused by certain vitamin and mineral deficiencies. Certainly a lack of B vitamins, particularly B12 and vitamin C, or of minerals such as iron, potassium and zinc, can cause you to feel low in mood. So it's important to include these so-called happy foods into your diet to stave off low mood swings. The good news is that for many of us, these things also are something that we equate with tasting nice. So things like chocolate and pasta and strawberries and French bread, bananas, grapes, oranges, Brazil nuts, and lastly, sesame seeds. Not Sesame Street, sesame seeds. Don't eat Big Bird and expect to feel better. It's also beneficial to our overall feeling of well-being to consume probiotics and enzymes to aid digestion and nutrient absorption, and have food that is antioxidant in our diet, and get omega-3s inside you. Many people traditionally associate omega-3 with fish, but farmed fish is corn-fed and doesn't produce anything like the levels of omega-3 that it used to on a natural occurring diet. So what else can help us with our emotions? To cultivate and develop emotional maturity helps us with how we feel. Feeling the higher levels of emotions unconditionally is a sign of this. An example of emotional immaturity would be conditional emotions. If you love me, then you'll, and then insert manipulative action or behaviour. Or you wouldn't do that if you, and then insert behaviour that they want or expect from you. Eliminate this low value emotional immaturity from your life. It backfires on you and ends up limiting your happiness and the quality of the relationships that you have and attract. Daniel Goleman talks about the concept of emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence refers to people's ability to monitor their own and other people's emotional states impartially, and to use this information to act wisely in relationships. Many people know what their IQ is, their intelligence quotient. Not so many people know what their EQ is, their emotional quotient, or their level of emotional intelligence, which arguably is going to be of more use in everyday life. So emotional intelligence has 5 parts. Self-awareness, which is recognizing internal feelings. Managing emotions, finding ways to handle emotions that are appropriate to the situation. Motivation, using self-control to channel emotions towards a goal. Empathy, understanding the emotional perspective of others. Handling relationships, using personal information and information about others to handle social relationships and to develop interpersonal skills. Let's look at focus. Being aware of our focus, where our thoughts lie, whether they're positively serving us or not. Monitoring how we feel to gauge our emotional level is a sign of emotional maturity. Seeing as what we focus on expands, it's wise to cultivate the habit of positive thought, focusing on inspiring and fulfilling emotions like gratitude for what we have and showing appreciation and sending those things out into the world. I myself used to think that deferring my own happiness to a future time when I had achieved a certain goal in my life would help me get there quicker. I'll be happy when such and such a thing happens. When I stopped delaying my happiness, I found inspiration rather than motivation, and consequently I found that I was actually more productive than before. I've heard the definition of motivation as where you get hold of an idea and you won't let go, whereas inspiration is where an idea gets hold of you and won't let go. Another crucial thing for us to remember is to use perspective. There's the phrase perspective, use it or lose it. And maintaining a sense of perspective helps us to feel that gratitude and appreciation. There was once a king who called for the wisest man in all the land to come and see him. The wise man was summoned, and the king said to him, "I have a ring, and I wish to have engraved upon that ring a phrase that will help me, to give me perspective, to give me optimism and hope in the bad times, but keep me level-headed and grounded when times are good." The wise man agreed and returned the next day with the ring in hand, freshly engraved. The king thanked the wise man and took the ring from him and looked down to read the phrase that the wise man had got engraved on the ring. As he looked down, he saw just 3 words: "It will pass." George Harrison from the Beatles understood this principle when he wrote his song, "All Things Must Pass." And is that a cue for a song? It is, but not that one. One of the things that unites people in happiness is music, and the act of having a sing-along seems to be on the decrease, and so I'm going to bring it back. So just for you, I've recorded this song with an inspiring message for you, originally recorded by Bob Dylan, and this song is dedicated to everyone who has been through or is going through any adversity in their life. And if you do want to sing along with the chorus, it goes like this.
I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, I shall be released. They say everything can be replaced. Every distance is not near. So I remember every face with every man who put me here. Come on. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, I shall be released. They say everyone needs protection, that everyone must fall. Yet I swear I see my reflection somewhere so high above this wall. Come on. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, I shall be released. Who understands a man in this lonely crowd? A man who swears he's not to blame. And all day long I hear him cry, shout loud, calling out that he's been framed. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, I shall be released. I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, I shall be released.
So in conclusion, there's really only two main ways that we categorize emotions: those based out of love and those based in fear. And fear is the opposite of love, not hate. And as there are opposite ends of the spectrum, and hate is just an intense expression of anger, which in itself is an overt and destructive defense mechanism set up by people in fear. And when you enter a room at night, for example, there's only a switch for light. The darkness is only the absence of light, as fear is the absence of love. So feel love, be loving, send out love, be a beacon of light and a real advocate for those higher emotions. Avoid just being a spectator in life. Get up and join in the game. The more we do, the more action we take, the more alive we feel. So make decisions, act, take action, interact, be active and proactive. Out of the information that you've heard here, what's the most immediate action that you can take, that you want to take, that will positively impact upon you? Take action. Be known as someone who is proactive, someone who avoids procrastination and self-sabotage. Also, when you think about the various strategies to help you that I've mentioned, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of something that you don't want to do? Something that is not the norm for you, something that's outside of your usual experience or definition of reality. Well, my advice is, whatever the last thing is that you wanted to implement that I've mentioned, do it. Take action. There's a gift for you right there waiting and pushing through your comfort zone and learning new approaches. You'll be even turning a Class 2 experience into a Class 1 and using some of the information you've heard just by doing that. So refer back to this podcast and share it with others and act upon the information. Avoid just listening passively and thinking that just processing the information in here intellectually is going to help you. Awareness and knowledge is, of course, useful, but don't be one of those people who think that endlessly filling their head with more and more information is the answer. People who endlessly buy courses without listening to them or not living the information. On that point, there was once a preacher who used to deliver his sermon every week to a packed congregation. And one day, a bishop is in the local area and he goes along to the church to visit the preacher and hear his sermon. He sits there listening, absolutely spellbound by this amazing sermon. And after the preacher has finished, the bishop goes up to him, shakes his hand, and tells him what a fantastic job he's done. And the preacher is naturally delighted. The next week comes around and the bishop is still in that area, so he thinks to himself, what a great idea it would be to go and hear what the preacher has to say to his congregation this week. As the bishop is sat there, he soon realises that this is the exact same sermon, word for word, as the previous week. So after the preacher has finished, a slightly confused bishop goes up to him and says, I enjoyed that, but it was exactly the same sermon, word for word, as last week. And the preacher looks at him, he smiles the biggest smile and nods and says, absolutely. So the bishop says, well, why didn't you vary it? Why didn't you give the people something new? To which the preacher replies, because everything that I needed to tell them, everything I wanted them to know, was in that first sermon. And the bishop says to him, but you've already done it. When are you going to change it? And the preacher looks back at him and smiles and says, when they start using it. So be one of the people that puts your knowledge into action. Avoid being one of the people forever locked in learning mode. When it comes to that behaviour, be like Snoop Dogg and drop it like it's hot. Knowledge is power, isn't it? No. No, it's not. Knowledge is potential power. If knowledge was power, then libraries would be superpowers. Acting upon it will inevitably get life to act back. Change can sometimes be painful, we've all felt that, but stagnation and apathy lead to a place that I feel is much more painful. Outside of our comfort zone is a place where incredibly powerful experience and growth happens. And in doing so, we're lifting ourselves up to see above those clouds and onto new horizons. Life's not all blue skies and sunshine. And anyway, the contrast in our life, in our emotions, gives rise to the desire that fuels us. History has repeatedly shown us that just one idea, backed up with enough inspired passion and dedicated action, can change the world. So you can certainly change your world. And what you send out into the world comes back to you. So make it positive things. And may the high frequency energy that radiates from you echo in eternity. Thank you so much for your time. I genuinely appreciate it. And many things are possible with love and affection in the right direction. Until next time, take care. Bye.